Come to me. When I chose the scripture for this morning, I needed to give a little bit of the tension part of that chapter in Matthew before you come to me, because there's so much tension. Jesus is pitting city against city, family against family, community against community, and it doesn't sit right. And then Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are heavy laden." And that's where I want to focus for our message this morning. But there is this tension in Matthew that we are going to deal with. Perhaps you know this moment. You park your car at the end of a day, or the alarm goes off at the start of the day, and you just sit there for a minute. Or if you're in bed, you just wait. Maybe you push that snooze button, but your hands are resting on the steering wheel, or you're in bed having been startled awake far too soon from the beeping alarm. But it's just you and the quiet and the heavy burden of what lies ahead. For some, it might be fixing dinner after a long, tiring day. For young parents, it's what you call the bewitching hour. When you come home, you've got dinner, baths, playtime, calming down, story time, bedtime. In the morning, it is dressing, feeding, getting children out the door, getting yourself out the door, getting on time to that first meeting. It's email, it's homework, it's pets, it's parents, it's children, it's relationships, it's second jobs, third jobs, jobs we volunteered for. But all the same, it's the weight of it all. And for that moment, we pause, just for one small moment before stepping into the next thing waiting for us inside the house or in the day ahead. Life feels heavy, and it seems more and more of us are carrying things that no human being was ever meant to carry alone. Exhaustion shapes us, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, communally. Exhaustion changes the way people think, the way people speak to each other, the way people move through the world. When human beings become tired long enough, patience grows thin, hope grows thin too, and compassion seems harder and harder to reach. And Jesus speaks into the world shaped by this exhaustion. Matthew's gospel was written after Jerusalem had been destroyed by Rome around the year 70. The temple was gone, families were torn apart and displaced, communities were frightened and unstable, people carried grief, uncertainty, political fear, economic pressure, and the constant question of what kind of future remained possible. That kind of exhaustion shapes people. And perhaps this is one reason the Gospel of Matthew sometimes sounds sharp, sounds judgy, sounds anxious, sounds urgent. Because exhausted communities do not always sound gentle. And boy, can we relate. We snap at each other more quickly. Drivers rage at strangers. Patience is disappearing at the grocery store, in the lines at the grocery store, in the comments section online, at school board meetings, at community meetings. Entire communities are organizing themselves around outrage instead of care. And that exhaustion begins to shape us. And our lives have become very good at exhausting us. Our phones glow up late at night. The news never stops. Work follows us home. Economic pressure sits constantly in the background. Many people work harder than ever and feeling less stable than ever. Exhausted people are easier to frighten, easier to divide, easier to control, even easier to convince that cruelty is normal. Behavior scientists and medical researchers now understand something human beings have probably known all our lives in our bones, and that is chronic stress changes the way people think, feel, sleep, decide, and relate to one another. The clenched jaw, the sleeplessness, the eating when we're not even hungry, and not eating when we are. Exhaustion changes us. It shapes us. The world teaches us that our worth is earned. We earn a grade. We earn the promotion. We earn the approval. Earn the paycheck. Earn the right to rest. And somewhere along the way, we start believing love works the same way too. Love must be earned. Belonging must be earned. Dignity must be earned. And the pressure begins so early. Children learn early that their measure of themselves comes by scores on school assignments, students by admission letters, athletes by playing time, workers by performance reviews, parents by whether or not everyone seems to be okay. And the questions are familiar. Am I doing enough? Producing enough? Achieving enough? Keeping up enough? Even ordinary conversations reveal this lesson. One of the first questions we ask one another when we meet someone for the first time is, so what do you do? Not what gives you joy or what breaks your heart. Can you imagine? What are you learning? What kind of person are you becoming? I mean, can you imagine if that was the norm? I kind of like it, but it actually kind of makes me unnerved. It feels safer, familiar, to talk in terms of output, in terms of measured success, because it provides some distance, less vulnerability. What do you do? Meaning too often, what do you produce? What can you measure? What makes you useful? This week, I spent some time reading and listening to the work and research of Dave Evans from Stanford University. He works at this interesting intersection of design thinking, vocation, and human life. He's a man of faith, and he was telling the story of one of his students who had come to see him about her concerns about her next steps in graduate school. And what he said about that wasn't even part of the point of the story. When she arrived for her appointment with him to talk about her career advice, he did not yet know her. So he's sharing this, and I'm listening, and so he starts the conversation by, how do you participate in this wild adventure? And then the story went on from there, but I was struck by that first question. How do you participate in this wild adventure? And it's as if the wild adventure part wasn't enough, but it was the participate word that got me. Because the world trains people to imagine worth as something earned individually or participating individually. That achievement or work is alone. Success is individual. Achievement is individual. Failure is individual. Suffering is individual. And yet, this word participate. How do you participate in this wild adventure? It was this opening of how to think differently. The world teaches us to explain our usefulness before describing our humanity. The world teaches that our worth is earned. And then Jesus speaks to weary people. In Matthew, after all of this pitting people against each other, Jesus speaks to weary people. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. The weary, not the polished, not the powerful, not the endlessly productive, the weary, the worn out. In Matthew, Jesus speaks to the laborers, those fishing families who are probably drowning in debt, communities surviving occupation, communities surviving instability, people carrying burdens they never created, but they still had to bear. And Jesus does not deny the brutality of the world surrounding them. Jesus names the exhaustion, honestly. He can name exhaustion, that other bill that just arrived, another diagnosis that we receive, another email of one more thing we have to do, one more meeting we need to attend, another headline of othering people, another problem to solve, another outrage, another fear, another night lying awake, wondering how everything will hold together. And perhaps that's why these words feel so startling true over 2,000 years later. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Because so much of the world speaks in the language of earning that this just sounds subversive. Jesus does not say, come to me once you finally hold everything together, or come to me once you are more impressive, or solve this problem, or fix yourself. Jesus just says, bring it and lay it down. Before the exhaustion is solved, or before the debt disappears, or before the fear settles down, or before the healing is complete. Just come to me. And that invitation matters because any society organized like a slave economy, where human value is measured by usefulness, productivity, and profit for someone else, will eventually collide with the gospel. Because Jesus never treats human beings as machines. Jesus never blesses endless productivity. Jesus blesses weary people. And perhaps that is why these words feel less like a command and more like freedom. Freedom to stop performing for one small moment. Freedom to loosen that grip. Freedom to tell the truth about the exhaustion. Freedom to believe human dignity exists before accomplishment. Freedom to just lay it down. Then Jesus speaks to weary people. And gentleness becomes the resistance. Jesus says more than come to me and rest. Jesus still says, take my yoke upon you. A yoke still carries weight. There is no checking out. Jesus is suggesting that there is relief and rest in following him, in loving others, a love that still asks courage, a justice that still asks sacrifice, a community that still asks patience, a truth that still asks honesty. And there is rest and relief in those actions. Jesus suggests that not every yoke leads to exhaustion. Not every burden crushes. Jesus imagines another way to live, a shared yoke, a humane yoke, a merciful yoke. One burden says, earn belonging, and Jesus says, receive belonging. One burden says, hide weakness. Jesus says, tell the truth. One burden says, human worth comes through productivity, and Jesus says, human dignity comes first. For I am gentle and humble in heart, says Jesus. Gentleness is the way. Gentleness is strength refusing cruelty. Gentleness is power refusing humiliation. Gentleness is love refusing domination. The gospel does not deny how brutal the world can become and is. The gospel refuses to let brutality have the final word. So when you feel the body tensing, lay it down. When you think the next problem is too hard to solve, lay it down. And when the next outrage or frustration bubbles up, take a deep breath and lay it down. Take up love. Take up taking a deep breath. Take up justice. Take up mercy. Take up relaxing the shoulders. Take up gentleness and humility. In our mission to follow Jesus, do justice, and build community, gentleness becomes the way, and gentleness becomes resistance. So perhaps tonight, or tomorrow morning, or in the next 30 seconds, when you need to take that moment once again, if you sit in the driveway for that extra minute feeling exhausted, or you hear something and your heart and your thoughts begin to race, and you begin to feel overwhelmed, or you lie in bed dreading the day ahead, remember, exhaustion can shape us. The world teaches us our worth is earned. Then Jesus speaks to weary people, and gentleness becomes resistance. Resistance through mercy, through honesty, through refusing to measure human value by productivity, through refusing to believe exhaustion is what makes a life meaningful, through remembering that people are human beings before they are useful beings. And perhaps that is part of what salvation looks like too. Not escaping the world, not pretending suffering is not world, not solving every problem before morning comes, but learning little by little to loosen the grip, to unclench the jaw and breathe deeply once again. To hear Jesus say, "Come to me," and to discover that gentleness, dignity, humility, rest, justice, and love were never weaknesses at all, but were in fact the way. And perhaps tomorrow morning when the alarm sounds, or tomorrow evening when the car pulls into the driveway, before stepping into everything waiting for next, you might take that deep breath. And perhaps that one deep breath itself becomes holy again. And Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Amen.